He was the most feared man in England, a king who had executed his own wives and defied the Pope himself. But in his final days, his greatest enemy wasn't a foreign army or a political rival. It was his own body. The King of England was rotting alive. His legs, swollen and black with infection, wept a foul mixture of blood and pus through sores that refused to close. The stench of decaying flesh was so overpowering that servants gagged, and courtiers held perfume cloths to their faces. This was the horrifying end of King Henry VIII, the man who believed he was a god on earth, only to discover that no crown can protect a king from the democracy of decay. This isn't just a story about a king's death. It's a terrifying look at how absolute power can lead to absolute destruction. If you're ready to uncover the dark truths that history books often leave out, then you're in the right place. To understand how the mighty king became a walking corpse, we have to go back in time. When a young Henry VIII took the throne in 1509, he was like a prince from a fairy tale. Over 6 feet tall, he was a gifted athlete, a brilliant scholar, and dangerously handsome. England celebrated its new golden prince, but beneath the surface, a monster was being fed. Henry's appetites were legendary. He devoured mountains of rich food, roasted swans, sugary pastries, and gallons of wine. His daily diet often topped 5,000 calories, fueling a growing obsession with power and control. For years, his strong body handled the abuse. But the first sign of the horror to come was the blinding headaches. They would strike without warning, a pounding agony that felt like his skull was splitting open. He would erupt into fits of violent rage, screaming, throwing objects, and threatening to execute anyone who looked at him the wrong way. The court watched in terror as their magnificent king began to transform into an unpredictable beast. Then came the day that sealed his fate. In 1536, during a jousting tournament, the 44-year-old king was thrown from his armored horse. The horse then fell on top of him. He lay unconscious for 2 hours. He survived, but the accident reopened an old leg wound. This single injury would become the source of a living nightmare. Before we reveal the final gruesome details of Henry's descent into madness, let's pause on this turning point. Do you think his suffering was divine punishment for his cruelty, or just a tragic medical accident? Let us know in the comments below. And if you find this dark side of history fascinating, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more. The leg wound never healed. Instead, it became a festering crater of infected flesh. Doctors tried everything. They cauterized it with red-hot irons and packed it with useless herbs, but nothing could stop the infection. It poisoned his blood, causing his legs to swell to monstrous sizes. The wound oozed constantly, and the sickly sweet smell of rot followed him everywhere. The king, who once commanded admiration, now only inspired disgust. As his body decayed, so did his mind. The unending, agonizing pain twisted him into a paranoid tyrant.
Where are they?
He was convinced assassins were everywhere, poisoning his food, his wine, even the air he breathed. His doctors lived in constant fear, knowing that if they couldn't ease his suffering, they could be the next ones sent to the executioner's block. He screamed at servants, issued death warrants on a whim, and locked himself away. The absolute power he had craved his entire life now became his prison. No one dared to tell him the truth about his health. No one could challenge his dangerous choices. The courtiers who once flattered him now avoided him at all costs. The king who demanded to be feared and loved was now utterly alone, trapped in a rotting body with only his pain and paranoia for company. By his final weeks in January 1547, Henry was unrecognizable. He weighed nearly 400 pounds, a bloated wreck of a man who could no longer walk. The gangrene had spread, and the stench of his body filled the royal palace. In his last moments, he was said to be delirious, screaming about phantom assassins and cursing God for his suffering. On January 28, 1547, the tyrant's reign of terror was finally over. But even in death, the horror continued. Legend claims that as his massive coffin was being transported, the buildup of gas from his rotting corpse caused it to explode, spilling the king's putrid remains onto the church floor. Henry VIII's gruesome end is a chilling lesson. The man who held the power of life and death over millions was powerless against the rebellion of his own body. In the end, his crown, his wealth, and his fearsome reputation meant nothing. He died not as a magnificent king, but as a prisoner of his own flesh. A cautionary tale that reminds us that mortality is the one executioner no one can escape. If this dark journey into one of history's most infamous stories captivated you, help us bring more of these truths to light by hitting that like button. Subscribe and ring the notification bell to join our community as we continue to explore the lessons hidden in the shadows of the past.